Okay, so we're recording, and then there'll be a point at the end of this where we get really comfortable and have good conversations, and we can do some problem solving, and we'll turn the recording off then. And if you could advance the slide, Katie, I can't do that, can I? Okay.
No, yeah, here, I'll just put them all out there.
Yeah. So we're again, we're advancing community goals through this work in the Year of the Artist by integrating arts and civic problem solving. And again, this is really about the process of art as well as the product. So we'll have some terrific products, but I think the process is going to be critical here. And through that process, we're going to explore and experiment. We're creating a learning community, paying artists, strengthening the network, connecting with each other, and I hope we're having fun. Now, I just had a meeting. We had an Arts Commission meeting, and I had a debrief with some folks afterwards, and I said, are we making this fun enough? Are we trying to do too much and not having enough fun? And I do think that's a concern. So let's have some fun. If I had a cat, I'd probably have more fun. I was just admiring Katie's cat. So we're going to do this. We're going to start off the same way we always do a little call for inspiration, reflection, and learnings. And we've already gotten started with that a little bit, just like in a real life meeting, how we come into a room and we start to connect and get reacquainted. We've already started doing that. So we'll do a few updates, not many, and then we'll turn it over to Katie for our training tonight on hosting effective meetings as community artists. So who has something? Catherine's already caught us up a little bit on the fourth floor gallery, third Monday gallery talks that happened last night. And who else has got something to share? Either something they've done, they've been inspired by, progress on a project, something they're learning.
Well, I had a good thing happen. Is inspirational this past weekend. I was down at Golden Cactus, and I was talking to somebody, and she actually turned out to be a STEM teacher, and they want to get into 3D printing and stuff. And I was like, well, perfect, because I proposed this 3D workshop I'm going to do to the libraries. I never heard anything back from them. So this may be another opportunity or another route to go there every month. It's in Franklin County. I don't know if that would be an issue or not, if it has to be in Roanoke City but I thought it'd be a good place regardless. I could go there and kind of show the kids how to do the software and 3D print.
And Franklin County they've done some really creative, innovative secondary education around technology. So they've got a great head start on that, I think. We would be interested in seeing how it can happen in the community. The names I gave you, I do know Charlesie is now the branch manager. Charlesie's fantastic. She just got named branch manager at Maine, and I know they've been a little understaffed, but Marissa is now back in place. So I am making a note I'm gonna basically find that email, and I'm gonna resend it to Marissa. And if I would like to get an answer from them one way or the other, and I'll make sure that happens. Yeah. But it can be, I've told people that for reaching outside the community, that can be a part of it. But I think the bulk of it needs to happen within the community, since we're using our resources.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I was just now thinking about that. So, yeah, I definitely want to do it in the community, but maybe I might do that as well, just on the side, just to help them out.
Oh yeah. And those connections are terrific. And that's why I saw you out there that evening. I think Catherine's been talking about being out there and the power of it, and talking about the kind of projects we're doing. And I saw also this weekend, I saw Christine was out there. Christine, where were you?
Go Fest.
Did you learn it? Did you learn anything out there at Go Fest?
Yeah. Oh, it was so much fun. Yeah. Speaking of fun, it was so much fun. So, we were calling this our trial run. So I got to debut a few projects and to see how they were working and to start thinking about how they might manifest eventually, like scale and location and that sort of thing. So that was fantastic. But it was also amazing to see Rachel and Mackenzie, and I met Curry, to see the stormwater crew in action and see how they relate to people and field questions and share information. And that was really inspirational to see, because it's one thing to talk with them about ideas, but to see them, they just really glow when they're dealing with the public. And that was phenomenal. And then I also got to see what people are interested in when they come to the stormwater booth. What are their questions? What are their interests and concerns? And that really helped me a lot as I'm thinking about this. So it's really exciting to get to this point where I feel like the wheels are in motion. And I know I was nervous at the beginning about how this was going to unfold, but it's feeling a lot more natural now. And I feel like we have quite a bit of momentum, and this was a big help. And it seems like every time we get together to do something, that's where a lot of things really fall into place. And then speaking of workshops, that's strange thing is happening too, where you're running into people when you start finding things out. And I was talking to Parks and Rec about projector, but come to find out, I mentioned maybe doing a workshop, and they'd be able to help with that as well in some way, maybe host it, or if we can have it in a park somewhere. And so those connections are starting to happen too, and that's really exciting.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
I was impressed and excited by how much traffic there was at the stormwater booth.
Yeah.
It was, I was like, because they've got lumberjacks out there.
I know.
And
Yeah.
a lot of interest in the stormwater.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for coming by. They do a really good job. They engaging with people. Like they had a big poster about voting on the drains around town, all the drains that have been painted, and people were really excited about voting for that. Mackenzie's designed stickers, and kids love stickers apparently, and so people came and picked those up quite a bit. And then there were quite a few questions about the bugs. They're like, "What is this? Why? And what is that?" I had some photo-based plant-based photos out there, and people were wondering how those were made, which led us to thinking about workshops a little bit more as well. So it was really great.
Excellent. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Catherine just is walking away, but I was going to check
Oh,
in.
here.
I was going to check in with her on last Tuesday's event. Catherine, how'd that go?
Oh, yeah, I gotta unmute.
Oh,
Wait, the opposite.
yeah, now you're muted.
All right, now am I muted?
You're good.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it's been that kind of day, actually. Christine, I do have to say, I went by your booth. I went by the booth, and I saw your art. I saw your photographs. I saw everybody was super busy and excited. So I just wanted to say it was great. I picked up one of the postcards to send to a friend. I have a friend, we do little mail art back and forth, and I think he'll appreciate it. So that's exciting. So Christine came to my workshop. So it was really meaningful to me. It's something I've been really dreaming up and working on personally. Being able to present this to other people and kind of get the feedback and feel the real kind of good the good connections I think that people made during that time we had. It did seem like people really wanted to continue to develop together and follow up on some of the thoughts that we had at that time. So it was a real positive experience. Thanks to Pedro, he came and did a little movement right at the right time. I think we were kind of feeling a little tired. We'd been doing a lot of brainstorming and thinking, so being able to do some movement and just gave us a little extra boost in the last hour when it really, I think we stayed an hour extra. So I think that everybody was pretty jazzed up about the opportunity to work together.
Great. That's a terrific sign. There was another in-person workshop, and we've got registration on the flyer coming up next Thursday on the 25th. That's Catherine Schnabel's workshop, and that's I think that's going to be a great space for some reflection and such, and it's going to happen at Ursula's Cafe. It's a great opportunity to check out Ursula's Pay What You Can or Pay What You Will Cafe, and then we've got more events coming up. So all fall we're having YOTA Tuesdays. And then you know, I mentioned again those Inspire grants. We've only got another couple of weeks for those that are out there. I don't expect we'll have a whole lot more coming in, but if you want to get out and see a cultural event, the Arts Commission will pay for your ticket for that. And then the third Monday gallery talks continue November 21st, which let's see, I don't have it listed on this one, but and Catherine, do you know if you have any more artists?
Yeah, I think on that one we were pretty well. We have a couple of artists. I can't remember the names right off the bat, but I believe we have a Julia, and then Bryce said he could do November. So we might get Bryce Cobbs to come. So we got 3, I think, have signed up for November, which is great because, you know, really it meant a lot to me that Michelle was able to make it and she brought a friend. But, you know, expecting the public to be there isn't really as easy to expect. But if you can invite your friends, or, if, you know, having Samantha come, just if we show up for each other, that's really helpful.
And Helen reported out to the Arts Commission tonight or this afternoon that she went last night.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping the sister cities people can start coming, because I think some of those connections, I got a message back from Mary Jo saying that she thought it was really nice to make some new connections. So just connecting the sister cities with the arts people and just finding the overlap. And Michelle brought somebody new that's new to the community that hadn't that was really interested in the work the Arts Council does. And so it was a really good experience, I think.
Terrific.
I thought you all did an excellent job too.
Thank you.
Very well planned, and it was great to get people involved in the conversation. So yeah, that's I think add a girl, add a boy.
Thank you.
And then the only other update I'd like to make or announcement is on Saturday at 11 o'clock. If you're available, there will be we're having a wrap party on the Southeast Greenway murals. It'll be at 13th Street at Bennington Park. The neighbors are making some chili. We're going to have some coffee and some cookies or some sweets out there as well. The mayor's going to be out there, and we're going to take a big group picture of everybody who helped paint the mural as well. So put that on your calendar. And with that, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Great. Hey everyone, for those who haven't met me yet, I'm Katie Trozzo and I'm a YOTA network weaving coach. And so really what that means is I help identify places where we can further support building and strengthening relationships between people in our network. And I also do very similar work for my day job at Virginia Tech. I support a number of networks and groups and teams coming together to work with one another. And so when I was tasked with thinking of a workshop to share, I really wanted to just share some of the fundamental practices that I've encountered over the years that have been really helpful for convening people and keeping meetings having forward momentum, and for people within the group to feel good while they're continuing to work with one another. So today, I'll start with a check-in and reflection, then I'll share some slides, and then I'll also pass it to Doug to share some practices that he's encountered as well around hosting effective meetings. And then we'll have time for question and answer. And so just ask that folks hold questions until the end. So maybe you can make a note on paper in your room, or even if you want to add a question to the chat, you're welcome to do that as a placeholder. And after Q&A, and actually before Q&A, we'll turn the recording off just so we can speak more openly with one another. And we'll also have opportunity for some prompts to explore some group discussion, because just acknowledging that we all carry a lot of experience around bringing people together as community artists. And so it's an opportunity to hear from one another. And then we'll do a closing. And then if anybody wants to stick on the call, Doug and I will be on from 8:15 to 8:30, and anyone else who wants to stay on can. If you have a specific scenario you want to workshop, explore together, we're available for that. Or if you just want to keep the conversation going. So just wanted to start out today. This is a practice we use a lot in our meetings, in the work that I lead, and just asking folks to check in some way with one another when they arrive. And so on Zoom, one option is to ask a question and then invite people to share their responses in the chat. So just wanted to ask you all, how are you arriving today? So if you just want to take a moment to sense in to what the weather is like in you today, and how you're arriving into this space with one another. So we'll just give it a moment for folks to reflect and type any responses they might want to share in the chat. Great. Thanks. We got some folks sharing some of the ways they're arriving energized and a little cold from this changing weather, feeling complex and strong, generally upbeat. And if anyone else feels they want to share a response in the chat, they can. You can kind of keep an eye on that as we move on to the next slide. So many of us are in meetings a lot, and many of us are in meetings occasionally, but I think we all have a sense of when a meeting's working and when a meeting is not working. So I just wanted to start out our conversation today with a little reflection around considering what are some of the things you experience when you are in a meeting that isn't working. Some things that you might think, feel, or sense, and you're welcome to put that in the chat. And since our group is so small today, you're also welcome to come off mute and share briefly just some of the things that come up in you when you sense a meeting isn't working. I know for me, I get really anxious and antsy, and I start thinking, maybe I don't even need to be here, and why am I here? Yeah, and we have someone putting in the chat, distracted and fidgety. So really honoring the ways in which we enter into space and how it affects our being and the ways that other people feel as well. And just want to invite you to consider and reflect some of the ways that you feel or some of your experience when you're in a meeting that is working. And we have someone else here when a meeting isn't working, that feeling that the presenter isn't prepared and they want to leave. But invite folks in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, just to sense, or even just reflecting on your own, what it is that you sense when you're in a meeting that is working. I know I feel really excited and I'm like, whoa, we're accomplishing a lot, and this is just happening really easily.
That's the same for me. When it feels like you're working towards shared goals, or that there's a lot of energy in the room, that the discussion is productive. And for the not working, it's usually when there's a lot of tenseness and disagreement, or that there are things that are being covered that that probably could have been sent out in an email, or you feel bored because they aren't addressing topics that are relevant to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a really good one. I agree. We got another one in the chat. Feeling good about the meeting is something that happens when a meeting's working and that it's not a waste of time. And really honoring that when people come together in meetings, that our time is really a precious resource, and that when we come, that's a gift that we're giving to our community, and really honoring people's time when you're convening them in space. We have another person coming in sharing that they feel a sense of feeling involved and included, having like-minded discussions and effectiveness. So really, thank you all for beginning and reflecting with me a little bit, because it really just touches in on the ways in which how we work together really, really matters. And our process really makes our product something that we can feel good about and look at and have a sense of accomplishment and pride and feeling included in that process. So I wanted to also, just before we begin, get a sense in the room around how many folks lead meetings regularly. And if you do lead meetings regularly, you can raise your hand and just keep it raised. And also in the Zoom feature, there's a way to provide reactions, usually on the bottom bar, where you can put any type of reaction. Anything that pops up in the corner of your screen will show me if that's you. So we got one person in the group that leads meetings regularly. You too, Douglas. Yeah. Okay. Okay, and we got Oliver. Yeah, great. Anyone else? Okay. And want to invite folks to raise your hand if leading meetings is something you're growing into and something that's less common in your day-to-day work. Okay, I'll just wait a second in case anybody's getting a little reaction in the corner there. So we got a couple people to where leading meetings is not something that they maybe do day to day. Okay, thank you all for that quick little pulse. That's helpful to know. So I'll first start out with in community. While I was preparing this presentation, I was realizing, oh yeah, there are these two different types of meetings that many of us may encounter as community artists. One is meeting in teams. So these are people that you work with regularly to accomplish goals. They're usually smaller. So some of the artists and residents might be encountering this. And also as an artist working in community, you may have a collaborator. So that might be part of your team. And then the other type is really what I'm thinking about as a community meeting. So that might be something where you're really inviting the community to participate in a specific way. You might be gathering input, perspectives, needs, allowing space for them to voice opinions and preferences. And those can be smaller, little focus groups with a few people or even one-on-one, but they can also be a lot larger. They can be larger group events. So as I'm going through these practices today, all of them are applicable to both types of meetings. And I'll try to also specify a little bit where there may be some nuances in some of these practices. And then there are a couple slides that I've included that are just relevant to hosting community meetings. So the first part I think about when I'm beginning to convene people is really getting everyone there. And that includes scheduling, setting the location, and communicating with participants. This is all really, really obvious, but sometimes there's so much learning in the simplicity of it and really getting into a pattern. So what I'm just sharing here is a pattern that I've found to be effective, and there are other ones that are effective too, and we can share and explore together after the presentation. But when I schedule, I often will use a scheduling tool online. The green one is called When to Meet, and that's a free scheduling tool that you can send to folks. And you can kind of set what days in a general block of time you might want to have people share their availability for. And it's really helpful because then you don't go back and forth sending dates and no one can participate, and then you have to resend more dates. That is one way to do it. I often, if it's kind of simple and I'm only working with a few people, I can just list a few dates and times in an email and see if that works. But the scheduling polls are really helpful when you get into team meetings and larger events. Well, actually not larger events. Here in the star, I said this is often less applicable to larger community meetings because oftentimes you may just set that date with a smaller core group of people and then announce it. So this is more relevant for team meetings. And another one is doodle polls, where again, you can select some dates and provide options for people to select their availability. So just wanted to share a couple of those tools just in case you hadn't encountered it yet. So usually I'll send an email out with a link to that poll and ask them to complete it by a certain date. And then once I find the best time, I'll send a confirmation email back to that group. And also just wanted to mention, sometimes depending on the group of people you're working with, calendar invites can be helpful, and Google Calendar has that type of feature, or if you use Outlook, that can be helpful, just to have on folks' calendars. It's not critical or required, but just something you may find you like or find a benefit for using. Setting the location. These days we have the option of in-person or virtual, and really just considering the goals of your gathering. It'll probably be obvious in many cases whether virtual versus in-person would make more sense. One thing I just wanted to share, there are a lot of free platforms for virtual meetings. Google Meet is one of them. Zoom is another one. But one of the catches is that if you meet with more than 2 people for more than 45 to 60 minutes, it'll cut off. So that's just one consideration if you're using one of those free tools, is that you may have a time constraint. But also there may be ways that we could support, Doug, if somebody needed to have some type of meeting link prepared for them that wouldn't do that. And then, so usually once all the meeting stuff is scheduled, everything's resting for a little bit. And then about a week before the meeting, I'm starting to think, oh yeah, we're convening. I'm going to send a reminder email to folks a few days before or up to a week before. And usually I'll have a really clear email, just thanking them for meeting, reminding them the date, time, and location, and sharing an agenda if one has been prepared for the meeting. And again, that address, the specifics of where to meet, whether that's in person or virtually. So that's about a week to a few days before I send that kind of comprehensive message, like this is everything we need for the meeting. And then I'll usually just reply all to that about a day in advance or the day of. That just brings it back up to everybody's emails, so that everybody has the information again. And so I just find that to be really helpful, because these days many of us are managing so many meetings and so many emails that as an organizer, I kind of I feel like it's not my responsibility to make sure everybody's tracking their stuff correctly, but it is. If I want them to be there, I want to have those little reminders, where all of us need it occasionally, just to be like, oh yeah, that was gonna happen then. So I just find it helpful to do those reminders. So once folks enter the meeting, I'll be sharing a few practices here. Again, these are applicable to both team and community meetings. So I'll be exploring the purpose of the meeting, introductions, check-in questions, group norms, rounds, notes and action items, and follow-up communication. So I'll go through each of these different practices that I've outlined. They just kind of emerged based on things that I find myself doing a lot in meetings, and that my team members do as well. So first, purpose is really important, because some of the things folks shared in the chat, like feeling like the meeting's a waste of time and that they don't need to be there. It's really important to lead with that purpose. And this is something I often share, like in the emails or the emails I send in advance to the meetings that I lead as well. Really just clarifying the purpose and some of the things we're hoping to accomplish in the meeting. So why have we convened our meeting? And what are the things we really want to complete? And this is really, really important for community meetings when you're involving folks in neighborhoods and in our city, to really be clear about the purpose and why you're inviting them there. Then introductions are key. This is something that like I occasionally forget, and I do encounter many meetings I enter into where I'm like, wait, I don't know anybody yet, or like there's this one person and I don't know them. This connection needs to be made. So I wanted to include that as a really important beginning point. So if your team is still forming or someone new joins, it's really important to invite a brief introduction of everyone entering the meeting, really so that everyone present can have an equal footing. That's also one of those things that'll help people feel included and part of the shared purpose. In community meetings, so there are ways to make sure everybody has name tags, and if workable, you could have a really brief introduction round where people share their names and their roles in a large group. If that's not workable, at the very least, you could do a little pair share where you ask people to pair up with the person next to them and introduce themselves. It's really important that folks just get a chance to share their name when they enter into meeting spaces together. And another practice, we already modeled this earlier in the call, but it is checking questions. So it's a brief question that everyone can respond to in a round at the beginning of a meeting. So today we did, how are you arriving today? But it could also be something fun, like what do you enjoy about fall? Or what color represents how you're feeling today? And this is really a place to express some creativity and really get to know one another. And this is another practice that helps to establish that equal footing when people are entering into the meeting and really helping people come together in the space. And again, like if you are in a larger group meeting, like say there are 30 people, it would likely be less workable to have everyone speak in a round their check-in question, but you could do what I call it, the pair share, and there's some other names for that too, but it's just, again, inviting people to connect to the person next to them and share about that check-in question. And it's important to allow folks to have uninterrupted space to share, and then to switch turns. So one other way of really bringing people together in a effective, I think this is another one of the foundational practices. So the first two introductions and check-ins are really creating the foundation for your meeting. And this is another foundational practice, which is group norms. So it's inviting your team or even participants in a community meeting to identify the practices that help them be in the meeting space in a way that works for everyone. So if you did this with a community, you could have the facilitator ask participants to reflect, like I did earlier with those two questions, like what are some of the practices that help, what we just reflected about how you feel when a meeting's not working or when one is working. But you can invite participants to think about practices that help them or that they've encountered that can help make meetings run better. And it's helpful to have a turn for each participant if it's a smaller group, and it can be something that you revisit and reflect at each team meeting. And so at our YOTA coaches meeting, this is on our agenda this week because it's our second meeting. So we will be exploring this as well. And Doug has group norms as well in some of the stuff he's sharing. So he'll share some examples. But I wanted to let folks know on page 75 of Springboard for the Arts, if you want to lead this, they have it like step by step listed out. And I think they do a really, really good job of it. So they explain exactly how to facilitate this activity. So again, it's something you can do in a team or a meeting, a larger meeting. So rounds is another one of these key practices, and this is one I really don't see practiced very often in, unless teams are really intentionally using it. But a round is really, in simple terms, when each person is invited to share their perspective on a topic in a circle, and they go one at a time, and each person and everybody listens to that person without interrupting them. So it's kind of like similar to Native American story circles where there's a talking stick. So really the person who's sharing is sharing uninterrupted. And that's really, really critical for when the input of the full group is needed or when decisions are made. And it ensures everyone's voices are heard. And over time, I'm always so surprised by what comes out that I wasn't expecting, because in meetings where rounds aren't employed, oftentimes you only hear from the people most ready to share, and there's some people who may just hold their comments. And when I also think sometimes folks don't necessarily have their perspective articulated until maybe they're specifically asked and provided a space to share it. So it really, really helps create a better picture of what's actually happening in the group. And I wanted to share, if anybody wants to go into like a real deep dive on rounds and how they can be enacted in community meetings, I'll be leading a participatory decision-making workshop on December 6th. And rounds are pretty much one of the key fundamental practices to decision-making. And so just wanted to let y'all know in case you want to join for that. I also want to share, like, if you're in a larger meeting, sometimes rounds, again, are less workable, and there's many other formats you can use for helping people be engaged and share their voices. And in a couple slides, I'll share some resources that you can access that can give you some ideas around that. So notes and action items, I really, really love this part. I love taking notes, but in a team meeting, it's really, really helpful for people to be able to follow along with the agenda, and for an archive of what's happened to be able to, for people to be able to reference after the fact. And I just wanted to share a little template that I've developed. Everybody's are different, but I find it to be nice to have the date, the attendees, the agenda, and the meeting notes, and then action items with due dates and the person who's responsible. Make it really, really clear about who's doing what and when it needs to be completed by. And that's such an important section that I pull it up to the top of the meeting notes that I'm usually creating. And so that's in a team context. And if you're meeting with people regularly, weekly or monthly, you might want to consider just having those meeting notes in a running document. And I usually use Google Docs just so everybody can access them really easily. So I just have one link, and over in the course of an entire year, all of our notes are captured within that document. So that's just one trick that I've found to be helpful. And when you're in a larger community meeting, some ways of having this note-taking practice is to have large easel paper, and so people can really see what's being shared. You can take notes on that, and you can also have somebody kind of designated to take notes on the computer too, if that's necessary. And so after the meeting, usually my rule of thumb is I try to get people the follow-up information within 48 hours, just so it's fresh and everybody has what they need. So this is especially in a team context. I just always start out with gratitude and thank them for their presence and input. I share the meeting notes link. Even if everybody knows where it is, I always link it just so it's really easy, readily accessible. Or if you have a Word document or other type of document, you can attach it. And then I pull some of the key information into the body of the email instead of just leaving it in the meeting notes. So one of those things is the action item. So I usually pull that into the body of the email so that everybody can readily see what their tasks are. And then I'll usually put in the date of the next meeting, just so we're keeping the flow going. This is one of those things that helps the momentum keep going and the accountability, just to have everybody on the same page for what's needed. In a community meeting context, after the meeting itself, I always send a thank you. And if there's any relevant follow-up information, I send that usually within a week. So I just wanted to share a couple things that are more specific to community meetings, facilitation guide, and different formats for participation. So the facilitation guide could also be considered like a facilitator's agenda, but it's really a guide that you can use or your fellow facilitators can use, where all the information you need is listed in detail. So this is different than like a simple agenda that might be shared with participants, because usually in these facilitation guides, I have one, I made one for Douglas and myself today. It has really, really detailed timing and notes under each section that are helpful for me when leading different activities. It shares who's doing what, any setup needs you have, and any other information you really need to have at the ready. Like if I'm leading a community meeting, I'm never without a facilitation guide helping me move through all the pieces that I need to consider while hosting that type of space. And just wanted to share some of the different formats for participation. I referenced this earlier around rounds maybe not being the most effective if you have a larger group, but it is really important to use different formats so that people stay engaged. So maybe there are times when the whole group is sharing, or you invite people to share in small groups or pairs. And just wanted to again kind of point you to our Springboard for the Arts handbook, because they have 16 group participation tools, and they do a really, really good job of outlining step by step what you need to do to be able to facilitate that. So some of the things they have are like asset mapping, how to lead a music circle, how to lead a question circle. I was just looking at this question circle. I really like that one. They invite people to share questions they have about a specific topic, and they can share more than one, and then they're listed out and people vote which ones they really want to spend time talking about. And then the group breaks out based on the top topics, and then people will explore and engage in dialogue on those. So they have some really great dynamic ways of interacting with folks. So just want to point you in that direction. And I also want to invite you to reach out if you need any help, if you're leading like a larger meeting, you want a second set of eyes on some of the things you're considering and how to make your vision happen. Happy to help out. You can email me at katie.trozzo@gmail.com. And same for if you run into anything in team meetings, happy to provide consult on that. It might be helpful if you put the YOTA support in the subject line. It's not a requirement, but it'll help me sort things a little bit more. With that, I'm going to pass it to Doug real quick, and then we'll have Q&A, because Doug has a really cool model that I wanted to make sure there was space to be shared.
So I want to point out, first off, how Katie is adept at moving groups along, capturing the progress. She's really been impressive to me so far, in working with the coaches and kind of keeping us together as a group. And that togetherness is kind of the key of it, right? If you're bringing a group of people together, the design of the meeting can be critical. And my rule of thumb used to be I'd spend twice as long planning the meeting as I would be in the meeting. When I was in charge of kind of making it happen. And that seems a little, it seems like a little bit too much. And maybe now I don't quite have the time to do that fully, but it's really important to think through what you want to have come out of the meeting, all the things that Katie just kind of referred to. And so when I'm planning the meeting, I love a mnemonic. I love something to help me remember what I've got to do. And ORS is something I've used for 25 years, maybe, since I was first introduced to it. And we've adapted it a little bit. We added a letter that's at one point. But the ORS, kind of how you're getting people rowing together. And that the notion that everybody comes into a meeting and is on equal footing it's never the case. Not everybody is comfortable in a meeting. Not everybody does their best thinking in a group process. And we really want to make sure we're creating a space that is going to work for everybody as much as we can. And there are ways that we can help people feel more comfortable. And the more we think through the meeting beforehand, the more we'll be able to make that possible in the moment. So ORS, outcome, agenda, roles, responsibilities, and scope. ORS, outcome, agenda, roles, responsibilities, and scope. So the outcome. So Katie called it a purpose, and you state it right out front. I put it at the very top of the agenda. Last night I had a meeting with Wise County and I said to the community, here are the 3 things we're going to do. They're pretty basic, but they're related. And I checked in with them. I said, now, if we leave this room tonight and we've done this, you think we're going to be in good shape? And we talked about it and that was our outcome. Okay, where do we need to get? What decisions need to be made in the room tonight, but when we leave? Okay, our next is the agenda. So we know where we want to go. The agenda is just how are we going to get there? And that's where the real design thinking kind of happens when you're planning the meeting. And so first off, the comfort, like Katie said, how do you first let people, how are they greeted when they walk in the door? Is there music? What's the vibe? Is there going to be food? Are there going to be children? We had 3 children in the room last night, and it changes the room. And so if you're able to plan for that, prepare for it, it's really helpful. And the kids make the meeting often. Okay, so outcome. So where are you going to get? Where do you need to get to? The agenda, how are you going to get there? The roles, who's going to take the children when they come into the room? Who's going to be the facilitator, the note taker? Who's making sure there's snacks there? Who's reserved the room beforehand? Who's going to set up the chairs and the tables? How are they going to be set up? And I bet Katie's like I am. And you can spend a lot of time thinking through how the tables and chairs are set up. If they're going to be at rounds, if they're going to be in a U shape, so that or if is it going to be in a circle? The circle is the most democratic shape possible, I think, where everybody can see each other. But if it's going to be a presentation style, that may not be ideal. If there's going to be food there, they might need a table in front of them. So who's taking care of all of those things? These roles are the individual pieces that everybody can play. There's one role that I want to point out. We call it a spark plug often. It's a person who just kind of makes things happen. And it might be that person who gets there early and prepares the space. It might be the person that is going to put the energy behind inviting people. It might be the person who, if they're in the room, the meeting just goes better. And who that is in a community or in a group. Okay, so in addition to roles, which are those individual roles that people play in preparing for the meeting and being in the meeting, we also have responsibilities. And we think of these as those shared responsibilities that Katie mentioned. Now, this is the heart of it. Now, the shared responsibilities, they can also be, you can think of them as values. You look at the kind of example list we have here: limit side conversations, be present, be on time, don't interrupt, speak for yourself, not others. Those are kind of basic things. Sometimes people will call them rules, and I don't like necessarily to think of them as rules, but are they shared values, shared responsibilities that the group comes up with together? Now, if you have those, then they can be a touchstone. And if you're running the meeting, I mean, who wants to be the kind of teacher voice up front in a meeting trying to keep people together? No one wants to be that person. But if you're able to create with the group, and I love to think about starting slow to go fast. This starting slow, this conversation about shared responsibilities can be foundational. If people say, and often what happens if a group has worked together some before, or some members of the group have worked together, you'll tell what issues have come up in the past, or where there might have been some conflict, or where people are kind of stepping on each other. For instance, if someone says, "Oh, speak for yourself, not others," there might be somebody who's a translator and thinks they have to translate for other people, which you don't necessarily want to have happen in a space. People can speak for themselves. So if you have those listed, once you talk about them, you check in with them. You can do a negative poll, and we can talk about that more some other time if we want to go deeper. Check in with them, get the group to agree upon them. When they've agreed upon them and they're not on a nice little flip chart, you can put it on the wall and then leave it where everybody can see it. And you as the facilitator, or if you're running the meeting, you can just, if somebody is starting to, like, say they're interrupting other people, you can just walk over and put your hand right on the flip chart. And you might not even have to say anything, because everybody knows what you're doing. And they can see, oh yeah, we said we weren't going to interrupt. I caught myself. I was interrupting. Oh, I was so excited. I didn't let her finish what she was going to say. So the group can check themselves as well once you have that. So outcome, agenda, roles, responsibilities, and scope. If you bring a group together, what's in their control and what's not in their control? Sometimes a group, you get them together and you'll say, okay, now what are the issues that it might be an inventory of issues. And first thing it might be, well, they might talk about the pandemic. Well, is that something we can control right now? Or they might talk about an issue that only city council is in charge of. And so you might have to talk about it a little bit and say, okay, now what can we affect? What can we not affect? Or is there a way to bring somebody into our space that can help us do that? So you might be worth going a little bit, but you don't want to have them go too far down that way if they can't affect it. So outcome, agenda, roles, responsibilities, and scope. Now, I think of these as a meeting planning tool, but as soon as you start to space, kind of step back from a little bit, you use every one of these when you're planning your project as well. So a group could be thinking about it in terms of, okay, this is the meeting, how we're designing it. Or you could say, okay, well, this is our project. What's our outcome from the project? How are we going to get there? What are the steps to getting there? Who's going to do what? What are our values that are keeping us together as we do this project? And how are we going to best work together? So that's ORS. And I love to say, I love the things I can remember. I can't remember a lot of things, but when you give me a little mnemonic and we're all rowing together, outcome, agenda, roles, responsibilities, and scope. Now, we'll do often a 2-day training that I designed, and I've done it probably 15 or 16 times, a 2-day kind of meeting facilitation training. And there are pieces of that we can pull out. It gets to be a lot of fun when you dig into it and you start to go deep. And I'm sure that if there's an interest, we can set some time aside, get people together. It costs us nothing really to do it in a way. And if you want to kind of talk about some of these things and you want to practice them, we might have some spaces you could practice in. At any rate, those are the ORs, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doug. In working in our team, I was really excited to learn this model. I really appreciate how we can kind of blend and learn from one another. And we'll have a chance to do that with everyone on the call, but do want to just invite any questions that you have for myself or Doug at this point. And this is where we have our